The first screen cut across the dry plains just as the sun leaned low over the ranch, sharp enough to spook the horses and draw every eye in the valley. And when she cried, "Please stop doing that forbidden thing," her voice trembled not with fear alone but with shame that had been hammered into her by years of silence, rules, and whispered warnings. For everyone in town knew what was forbidden here: mercy without permission, kindness without approval, and love that crossed the invisible lines. Drawn by men who called themselves righteous, she stood barefoot in the dust, bruises staining her legs, clutching those wide green leaves against her body as if nature itself was the last thing willing to protect her habit torn, her faith questioned, her dignity already sentenced, while the rancher knelt before her not in prayer but in stubborn defiance, his hand still extended, still offering what the town had forbidden him to give: a place, a name, safety, despite the gasps rising behind the fences where neighbors gathered like vultures, muttering that he was breaking sacred order, that a man like him had no right to interfere, that a woman like her deserved silence, because she was supposed to be invisible, a rumor, a mistake sent away to be forgotten. The rancher had heard it all before, heard it when he refused to turn away hungry children, when he buried men no one claimed, when he let runaways sleep in his barn, and now he heard it again as the wind carried the town's outrage toward him like a storm. But he did not withdraw his hand, did not lower his eyes, because something in her plea struck deeper than fear. It struck the lie beneath the rules, the lie that suffering was holy if it was quiet. The woman's tears carved clean lines through the dust on her face as she begged him to stop, not because she didn't want what he was offering, but because she knew the cost of accepting it, knew the punishment waiting beyond the fences, knew that once he crossed this line for her there would be no turning back for either of them. And the rancher saw that too, saw the way her body flinched at every raised voice, how even kindness felt dangerous now. Yet still he rose slowly, deliberately, as if daring the whole world to watch, and said he would not stop. Not today, not for them, not for laws written by cowards who never stood where she stood. That was when the town truly went mad, when men shouted that he was defiling tradition, women hissed that she was tempting him, elders swore this would bring ruin, and even the church bell rang as if to warn the heavens. But the rancher did not shout back, did not argue. He simply led his horse closer and offered her the saddle. An act so simple and so forbidden it felt like blasphemy. And when she hesitated, whispering again for him to stop, for him to save himself, he answered softly that some things were worth being damned for. And in that moment the town saw what terrified them most: not sin, not scandal, but a man who would not obey their cruelty, a man who chose compassion even when it burned. And as she finally placed her trembling hand in his, the crowd erupted, not realizing they were witnessing the beginning of something that would expose every lie they had ever hidden behind their rules, a defiance that would not end quietly, and a mercy that once unleashed could never again be forbidden. The day she finally placed her hand in the rancher's, the town felt as though the earth itself had cracked open, because what had been labeled forbidden for generations, mercy without permission, protection without judgment, was suddenly happening in full view, and no one could look away. The rancher lifted her onto the saddle and remained standing on the ground, as if silently declaring that whatever punishment came next would fall on him alone. And as the horse moved forward at a slow, deliberate pace, the crowd erupted in fury. Some shouted curses, others clutched prayers like weapons, and a few bent to pick up stones. But for the first time in her life, the woman sat upright, the weight of shame no longer bending her spine, her body still marked by pain yet her spirit unmistakably alive. By nightfall the news had spread like wildfire. and the town council gathered in anger, issuing decrees and righteous threats, declaring that the rancher had violated law, tradition, and holiness itself, that his land would be seized, and the woman returned to the place she had escaped. Yet what they failed to understand was that the rancher had never truly been alone. When the sheriff arrived the next morning with a warrant in his hand, he found the road to the ranch blocked by people, the very ones the rancher had fed when they were starving, healed when they were sick, buried when no one else would claim their dead, and they stood there silently, forming a human wall, because injustice thrives on obedience but collapses when ordinary people refuse to step aside. Inside the house, the woman stood by the window, fear still whispering in her chest, memories of cruelty etched into her skin. Yet this time she did not run, because the rancher had given her the one thing she had never been allowed to choose before, the freedom to stay or leave without being owned by either decision. When the sheriff hesitated, voices rose behind him, first one woman, then another, then many. Women who had been taught all their lives that endurance was virtue and silence was holiness, and they declared that if protecting her was a crime, then they were guilty too. And in that moment the town realized it was no longer judging a man or a woman, but confronting its own reflection. The council's authority crumbled, shame replaced outrage, and days later the woman's name, once spoken only in whispers, was said aloud with respect as she worked on the ranch, laughed cautiously, and sometimes cried openly beneath the sky, no longer hiding her tears. The rancher never celebrated his defiance, never called himself a hero, because to him it had never been rebellion, only a choice, humanity over fear. And in time the children of the town ran freely across the fields, neighbors helped one another without asking permission, and people finally understood that the truly forbidden act had never been kindness, but the courage to stand against cruelty. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that one brave decision can change an entire world, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel.